All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to call our panel for today. But before I call our panel, I want to introduce about himself. Okay? So, his name is Sharmaarke, Mr. Sharmaarke. And then he is all the way from Kenya. Yeah? He's from UN Habitat, Nairobi, Kenya. Okay. He has served on various community boards and advisory committees in Canada and the US, or we call it the United States. And Sharmaarke has been actively involved in grassroots organization, coalition, and group committed to youth empowerment, social equity, and human rights issues since he was a teenager, like you guys. Okay, so that's why I'm very proud to all of you, because during my age, I do not know what I'm doing. But now you receive so many exposure, and that is very good, and you are the selected people, all right? So, Sharmaarke has over 15 years of experience in policy, program management, youth development, and community development field. He has worked in all three levels of government in Canada, as well as the non-profit sector in the areas of policy, community development, crime prevention, and project management. Wow, this is wonderful. Over the last 3 years, Sharmaarke has been managing UN Habitat's youth program globally. He has recently moved to the External Relations Unit, where he's responsible for managing donor relations and stakeholder engagement. Very, very awesome. Okay. So, if he can do it, you also can do it, right? Okay, next. Sharmaarke holds a BA Honours degree from Carleton University and a Master of a Research degree in Public Policy from Queen Mary University, London. Sharmaarke grew up in the Ottawa's East End, and in his off time, he enjoys spending time with his wife and 2 daughters, attending community events, and getting to better know Nairobi, where he is currently based. Wow, it's very nice. So, without further ado, I would like to call upon our Mr. Sharmaarke Abdullahi. Please welcome.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I love the energy. Can we try that again? Good morning. Much better. Much better. Thank you for the kind introduction and the warm welcome here. I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers, Dr. Maliki, his team. We had the honor and the presence of the Deputy Minister, Mr. Stephen Sim, here today. So I'd like to thank everyone for your warm welcome, and I greet you all with the greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I have the hard task of really breaking down what the Sustainable Development Goals mean, with 17 goals and about 169 targets. So I'll do my very best to go through them and to talk a little bit about who I am and why we've partnered with the International Youth Council in terms of UN Habitat and what we do. So I'll begin with just telling you guys a bit more about the agency, and I'll also, just to give you an impact in terms of, or an idea of the work that we do, I have 3 videos. One is a video on the World Urban Forum, which takes place every 2 years. The last World Urban Forum was in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. The most recent one in 2020 was also in Abu Dhabi, which the International Youth Council of Malaysia participated in and did a phenomenal job. So I'll begin with that, and it gives me great pleasure to be with you here today on this important and timely discussion on the importance of leaving no one and no place behind. And I'll tell you why I put no place in there, because at UN Habitat, we are the UN agency mandated to work on sustainable cities and communities. And if you look at the demographics, who makes up a city? Who makes up a community? It's a lot of young people, like yourselves, families, as well as seniors. So how can we think about planning our cities and communities that is fit for purpose or to meet your needs? And so I'll go on to my first slide. If you can show the next slide. So the UN system is very, very complex. So what I wanted to do is very simply explain to you how UN Habitat's mandate falls within the UN system. So as you can see, in the middle we have sustainable urbanization and cities, which is sustainable goal number 11. But what brings everything together? So there's 17 sustainable development goals on the right-hand side that the world committed to. This is a very ambitious target. So world leaders, after the Millennium Development Goals in 2015, came together and said, we want to create a better world. How do we create a path? How do we create a vision for a better world? And they came up with 17 goals. And the goal was by 2030, make sure that we reach those goals. So on the left-hand side is what we call our Bible or the Quran, our roadmap in terms of how can we look at sustainable development goals and create an urban framework for them. So we have something called the New Urban Agenda. And I'm sure you guys are extremely tech savvy. You can Google this. It gives you a beautiful PDF of what the New Urban Agenda is. But what the New Urban Agenda basically is breaking down the 17 development goals and looking at how they impact urban development. And what you have 3 are real global compacts that the world is committed to. So how many people are familiar with the Paris Climate Accord? Just to show it, Paris Climate Accord. So none of you guys are looking at environmental issues? So the Paris Climate Accord was signed in Paris, in France, to say that we need to take care of our planet and the environment because it's really important to us. The second one is looking at the Sendai Framework. How many people are familiar with the Sendai Framework? Yeah, a few? So Maliki, I think we have homework for everyone today. After this session tonight, hopefully I see you guys tomorrow. You'll be able to tell me what the Paris Climate Accord, the Sendai Framework, and the last one is the Addis Ababa Action Accord. So I think the Sendai Framework is particularly important for this region because this region is pretty, unique when it comes to environmental issues. We was talking to the honorable doctor who's worked in NASA, and she was talking about some of the droughts in the regions and the floods that you have in this region. So this is an important accord for you guys to get to know. So if you go to the next slide, please. So here are all of the sustainable development goals. And what I wanted to do was create an image to show you how sustainable goal number 11, which is on sustainable communities and cities, really impacts every sustainable development goal. So instead of me, telling you exactly what the targets are, which is boring, you don't want me to read 169 targets and maybe, 15 targets for sustainable goal number 11, I thought it would be good imagery to show how are they all interconnected to the different targets within sustainable goal number 11. So why am I talking about this? What's the importance of this? Well, this forum is being held at a critical point in time that sustainable urbanization as we embark on the decade of action to implement the sustainable development goals. So what I mean is 2030 is not that far behind, not that far ahead. We only have 10 years to get to these goals. And the first 5 years we've spent really building the framework for how we're going to get there. So this is the decade of action. So I want you to keep this in mind as you continue to do the work that you're doing in your communities and how important the sustainable development goals. Know that we only have 10 years to reach this goal. So it's a very ambitious target. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals are known as the world's blueprint to achieving a better and more sustainable future for all. They also address global challenges that we face, including those that are related to poverty, which is SDG number 1, inequality, climate change, peace and justice, and making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, and resilient. And I think the tagline of Sustainable Goal number 11 is very dear to my heart because inclusivity is important. One of the things that I'm mindful when I travel around the world, when I meet young people like yourselves is 3 questions. Who's in the room? So for those of you who've been selected, I know most of you are extremely high achievers, but who is in the room, right? There's a certain privilege to be in this room. Who's outside the room? and who's around the room. So we need to think of inclusivity in everything that we do as we move forward. And, I think I'm going to challenge Maliki and colleagues to think of not future leaders. I think you're the leaders of today. Many of you in this room today are leaders, and I'll end with one of my favorite phrases. One of my mentors shared with me, and I'll end with that phrase. But I think we need to think of you guys as leaders of today. The solutions to the 2030 goals are going to come up from your generation, and this is going to impact your lives just as much as anyone else in the room or the people that have come up with these ideas. So your presence here also demonstrates to me that the commitment to leading the change in the world that you want to see. A lot of you guys, when it came to applying for this, it took a lot of effort. It took some competition to get in the room today, and I think you've persevered and you've made sure that you've taken that first initial step to want to be a leader. So, I know you guys are not shy. Can anyone tell me, just real quickly, very briefly, what does leadership mean to you? You can just, helping others? Influencing others? I heard action. Exemplary. Good values. Accepting others. Service. Sorry? Kind. Inspire. Fantastic. Give yourselves a round of applause. So when I was growing up wanting to, choose a path for myself in terms of what I wanted to study academically, I had wise advice from my mother. And she said, think of an education as the basis of your foundation. So getting a good education is the basis of a foundation. But don't think that because you have this education, that's it. You can put your university degree or a master's degree or a PhD on a plaque and say, look at me, I've done well. She said, what is the service that you're going to do with this education? How are you going to serve others with the education that you've gotten? And those words resonated with me in terms of choosing a passion. So academically, I'm trained as a lawyer. I have a law degree. I'm not practicing law. It's not something that I was really interested in. But I like the skills that it offered because it gives you good technical skills to read through, to think through, to challenge norms, to challenge policy. But working with young people is a passion of mine. And working at the international level is what I wanted to contribute and how I thought of service, of my service, with the education and the experience that I've had. So as you're thinking through what do you want to study in university, I repeat those words that my mom said, many years ago, I'm a lot older than you guys now, is what are you going to do with that education and how are you going to use that as a service to the community that you're from, but also to the broader world? So I leave you with that. Now, more context, and I wanted to make sure that my talk addressed the specifics of why Malaysia is so unique and the important opportunity here. So Malaysia is one of the fastest and most urbanized countries in the Asia-Pacific region, with 75% of the total population living in urban areas. This is especially important as the region also hosts the largest generation of youth in history, who are currently, burdening a lot of the sustainability issues, if not improving the socioeconomic growth of the region that is experienced in the past few decades. And by 2030, 80% of the world will be urbanized. If you can just go to the next slide for me, please. Here is a picture of how the world has become extremely urbanized. So by 2020, which is this year, 56% of the world is going to be urbanized. And by 2030, that estimate is 80%. So as the world continues to be urbanized, how can we think of better service for our aging population? better service for younger generations, and also the quality of life that we want for everybody that are living in urban areas. So rapid urbanization and rapid urban development in Malaysia has brought about radical change in the benefits and contributions of the national growth of development. GDP per capita has increased in the last 15 years, since 1970s, from $1,000 to 11,000 in 2018 per household. 75% of the country's GDP is generated in cities. So a lot of the GDP and the growth and the economic boom of the country is generated in cities. However, urbanization process has also had some inefficiencies, such as the concentration of activities and resources in big cities and mega cities like Kuala Lumpur. But how are we thinking of secondary and tertiary cities across the country? Can we think of planning a little better? And your generation has the solution. And as you think of job opportunities and growth, if a city like Kuala Lumpur has peaked in terms of urban growth, your opportunities might be coming from the second or third cities around the country. And this is where you need to be thinking as you think of your future growth. So there are also challenges in rapid urbanization. You know, how do we think of rural to urban migration? We don't want to get rid of the rural, cultural linkages and the heritage that we have. We need to think of low urban density and increase of urban-rural sprawl, insufficient urban regeneration and urban renewal. And again, you'll realize, hopefully at the end of my talk, why I'm talking about urban. This is my reality at UN Habitat. We are responsible for urban and rural development and making sure that the interlinkages between the two are connected. Some of the other challenges also include, poor urban mobility and connectivity in cities, lack of employment and lack of underemployment of youth. And I know this is a real challenge for a lot of young people across Malaysia, is lack of employment and underemployment. Can anyone tell me what I mean by underemployment? Sorry? Working with a company? No. Jobless? No, that's not what I mean by underemployment. So what I mean by underemployment is somebody who, for example, their work and the skills that they have, so the years of experience, the qualifications in terms of university education, does not meet how much they're earning. Right? So there's a lot of that. And it's not specific to Malaysia. There's many countries around the world who don't adequately pay young people for what they're worth. And I think this is important to reconsider and important to think through as we go through and as you embark on your journeys and you move on from this process. So I think it's also important to note Malaysia as a real model for sustainable urbanization in the region. And if you look at the GDP per capita, you look at the income growth, you look at the social safety net of the country and why institutions like the International Youth Center are really, really important for the development, and your development is key. Because it's not, if a country, I'll give you an example, a really local example that you can all relate to. Singapore, for example, has a very, very, very high income ratio, right? But the social safety net is not that strong, which means the gap between the rich and poor is quite high. Whereas in Malaysia, it's a lot closer. Why? Because you have a social safety net. And that, to be honest, is what makes generations and what makes, what creates protection in societies to ensure that young people are protected and don't fall through the gap. So I have a few remarks, and I want to show you some work that we've done across the world, and particularly in one region of the world. So building a better future is only possible with serious and committed action right now, not just from youth, but a collaboration between government institutions from leaders here today. In this context, the 1.2 billion young people in the world, the most connected generation in history, hold the hope and potential to create progress towards a more sustainable, equitable world today and tomorrow. With the power of youth leadership and energy, it's time to realize and accelerate the meaningful results in all aspects of international sustainable development. After all, it's our generation who stands to lose the most if we fail to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Young people are a vital force in getting the most out of this decade of action. And we need to ensure that this is ignited, not in just this room. I want you to take this as you leave here today. That your power and your potential is not limited, it's unlimited. And you continue to think through this, and you continue, you'll hit some rough spots. You'll hit some times where you're going to be questioning and challenging yourself. But never forget your potential and the impact that you have to sustain and change your community and where you live. And this will, inshallah, translate as well to international change, the change that you want to see globally. So if you could go to the next slide for me. I doubt that you want to know our strategic plan and what we stand for and what UN Habitat really means, but really quickly, I think it's imperative for me to tell you that UN Habitat, we are one of the longest standing youth programs in the UN system, and this is the first time in 2019 that the Secretary General at the highest level said we need to have a holistic and comprehensive youth strategy across the entire UN system that unites all the different youth agency, the youth serving agencies across the UN system. So for the first time, we've developed a UN-wide youth strategy. This is also available online. UN Habitat was one of the lead organizations working on this. And, you know, reaching back for those furthest from behind is something that resonates with me really well. And I want you guys to think through this as well. Again, you have the privilege of being in the room. There are many of your colleagues who weren't as lucky as you were, who weren't selected to be here. But how can you share what you guys have learned throughout the last few weeks, the last few months, with your colleagues who aren't in the room with you? And I leave that challenge to you all as you leave here today and think through, how can you share this information with your colleagues? We can move on to the next slide. The methodology that we work with, I think, is in line with the International Youth Council's methodology and our model. Our model is really positive youth-led development. So where young people lead their own development, and as adults, as mentors, as supporters, we support them and ensure that we're not in their way too much, that we're supporting, we're guiding, but young people are very much at the leadership helm and ensuring that they're leading this process. Maybe we can just play two videos. To conclude, we can go to the next video, please. Oh. So as you cue it up, I'll just introduce this next video. So one of our projects and why, again, this partnership is unique with the International Youth Council of Malaysia is because one of our models that we've been piloting around the world and now sustaining around the world is what we call our one-stop youth center model. And the purpose of the one-stop youth centers is really to create a safe space, a holistic space where young people can get together, exchange ideas. We have gender-specific programs depending on what region of the world that we're in. So we have these in Kenya, in Somalia, in Tanzania, in Uganda, and Rwanda. And our goal is never to support the youth centers forever. We just want to make sure that we work with the leaders of the youth centers. We renovate existing spaces so that we're not spending a lot of money building new centers, and that we connect with local government so the sustainability is at the community level. So I want to show you some of the work that we've been doing in one of the poorest communities in Kenya. It's one of the largest, second largest slum in Africa. It's called Mathari. We have about 500 young people who use this service every 2 days or so, and the average a day is about 89 young people a day who are using these services on a daily basis. And I want to show you a really powerful story of one of the youth leaders there who we've been working with since 2002.
Mathari is one of the oldest most informal settlements in Nairobi, Kenya's capital. This slum is home to hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children, each struggling to earn a living. Lack of social amenities, public spaces, coupled with a history of crime and endemic poverty, makes Mathare a unique community. Regardless of the hardships, the youth have come up with innovative ways of bringing positive change. One such group is Mathare Environmental Conservation Youth Group.
So my name's Isaac Mwasa, but I am known as Kaka. Kaka means brother. For me, I'm a community leader, and I really support the young people. For me, I like supporting young people who are innovative and who are coming up with ideas to support other young people in building the nation. As the young people, we are looking for opportunities to see how we can change the community and create employment amongst the young people. Talking about the challenges that the community was facing in 1997 to 2000, I can say that there was garbage everywhere. There was diseases. Sometimes even you find aborted babies, they will have been thrown there. So it was a big challenge to us.
We'll stop right there, and we can share this video a little later. But what you've seen there was, in the slum, there is no space for young people. And young people getting together and making sure that they advocate. The space that you've seen where they're playing soccer and football was an 8-story high garbage. Could you imagine 8 stories of garbage where people have just been dumping for over 20 years? Young people came together and said, we don't have a space, this is not healthy, we want to clean this space. So they've cleaned the space with our support and our help. We have now put 2 plastic shredders in the youth center where they're actually shredding plastic and selling those plastics to vendors so they can come up with different innovative ways of recycling. They're using plastic. We are training them now to use this and to create keychains out of plastic. And they're selling to tourists 2 days a week in markets. So this is again just a little bit of a support. All the work was done by young people in the community. We've also worked with the government and the county government of Nairobi to say, you're not coming here to clean garbage. Why don't you give the cleaning contract to youth in the community who can earn a living, but also go door to door and collect garbage in these communities? And now this has been done for the last 10 years. And Kaka, who you've seen there, has won all sorts of awards across the world internationally for the work that he's done. The second video is the importance of planning. And it's really short, so the next video, before you start, next video, next slide, please. Before you start, let me just explain it really quickly. You know, again, our role in the UN system is really as urban advisors, and you know, a large portion of our team is made up of city planners. And when you think of the way cities are planned, sometimes they weren't planned thinking through how people are actually going to use them. So I want to just show the importance of a planning process. And if you look at informal parts or informal settlements, they're not really mapped out in cities. They're not mapped out in official maps. And what does that mean? It means you don't have any services and the government doesn't have an active approach to serving your needs in these communities. So this video, next video, really, really short,
Maps from all
explains
over
this
the world
process.
can be found at the click of a button. But sometimes places that look blank are actually full of life. This is Primosh, and this is Isaac. Primosh and his company, Spatial Collective, work with community organizers like Isaac to map unmapped communities.
Despite the popular belief, the world has not been mapped yet.
Unmapped communities are literally not found on maps. Important things like roads, schools, and hospitals are missing. When communities are unmapped, governments can easily overlook them. This means that they miss out on vital resources that they should have access to.
Informal settlements are usually not connected to the formal grids, such as water or sanitation, or even electricity. So the maps make communities legible or visible to the outside world.
The process begins with members of the community gathering information on foot.
We use various mapping tools, including GPS and mobile phones, to collect data.
These data points are then sent to the team at Spatial Collective. They plot them and fill in the map. When citizens have information about what they're missing, they have the power to advocate for what they deserve.
Mathare is the second largest slum in Kenya. It's an area where there's a lot of issues, lack of proper sanitation, there's insecurity. So we've collected a lot of data. We've mapped all the hospitals, mapped all the schools. Mapping empowers me to make sure that we bring services to our people.
A picture tells 1,000 words, and with map, that is more than true. It can attract more investment, more interest. It can help in many different ways, once you know what's there.
So if you can go to the next slide, and I'll end with this slide here, and recognize that we're out of time. So I asked a lot of you guys, what does leadership mean to you? And a lot of you spit out some words. And one of, I think I heard again and again, action was something that someone said. And at the beginning of my talk, I said there was a mentor when I got into this work who said something to me that was very powerful. And he said, leadership is action, not position. So just because you've been selected, because you guys are very smart, you've worked really hard to get here, think of the actions that you're going to do to change what you want to do. And I think this is what I'll leave you with, this last word of leadership is action, not the position that you have. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Sharmaarke. Mr. Sharmaarke, please have a seat. All right. So today, Mr. Sharmaarke, you know what? I'm very honored to meet you, and then I'm very honored to meet with these young leaders. And I can't wait to go back to my university to inform my students that I meet you. So they would be very proud because I meet someone who are really from United Nations. I'm very honored to have you. Can I have a shake hand with you one more time? Yeah, thank you so much. All right. Okay, young leaders, remember, leadership is not a position, but it is an action. So you have to lead by example, yeah? Okay? So we will have a Q&A session. So as been informed by our floor manager, we will only accept 2 questions from the floor due to the time constraint. So if you have a question, please raise up your hand and directly ask our Mr. Sharmaarke. One question from you.
So hi, I have one question for you. So from the previous video that I saw, we know that one of the element of Sustainable Development Goals 2030, one of the element is no poverty. So can you prove to us and change my stigma? How can we achieve one of these elements in 10 years? Thank you.
Okay, next question, last question, because we collect the question first and then Mr. Sharmaarke will answer all.
So my question is basically, it takes a lot for somebody to get into doing all these kind of things that benefits the environment and the planet. What has inspired you to do this? Thank you.
Thank you both for the questions. So I'll tackle the first question and then I'll move on to what's inspired me. I think your question is very loaded. It sounds like a simple question, but it requires a lot to think through. I think in 2015, when the world came together and said, we want to be aspirational, we want to change something, the first goal that unanimously everyone agreed on was poverty. The issue of poverty means a lot to a lot of countries around the world, and this is something that I think we can tackle. And you know, how I can prove to you that we can do this, I don't have all the answers, the proof now, but I can share with you some of the work that we've been doing and other agencies are doing to do this. So one of our key priorities in the new strategic plan that we have is to address the issue of inequality in housing. And housing sector, and particularly poverty related to the lack of affordable housing, the informal settlements, and the issue of poverty. Now, it's a very complex situation, and I'm not going to have all the answers for you, but I can tell you that without the collective action of youth, of governments, of academics, of community organizations on the ground, that we are not going to achieve this. So the collective action to ensure that we are all working towards ending poverty, and if we don't have this collective action and this energy coming together, we won't reach it by 2030. One of the things that I've been thinking through since coming to Malaysia has been the Sustainable Development Goals are passed at a national level, right? So governments have signed at a national level. What we need to do is localize this into local action, and I think a lot of you who are here today are learning and talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, but at a very local level, at a city, at a community level, I think if we work together to address the issue of poverty, we can achieve that. But it's got to take place at the local level. So I hope that clarifies or maybe answers a little bit your question. But without local action and without collective action of people coming together, we're not going to achieve this. That's the reality. And we only have 10 years to reach this target. So I'm counting on you all. I'm counting on you to also hold your governments accountable, to think of ways that you can end poverty. Now with the advancement of social media, you can easily put a message out if you're not happy with the way certain community or a certain neighborhood in your city is living with poverty. You can mobilize your friends to do something. The youth center in Nairobi, the Mathari video that I showed, it was all a bunch of youth who grew up in this community who wanted to do something, who wanted to change. Every Saturday, 500 families are fed at that youth center. There's no money that comes from government. It's communities who live around who've put their money together to ensure that they can feed this family. So think about local action and what you can do yourself in terms of changing and how we can collectively work together. The second question around what has inspired me to work in this field, so very selfishly, I wanted a career that was challenging. I wanted something that would continuously keep me on the edge and ensure that I would be learning. I would be also learning the different realities of young people around the world and being a champion of young people wherever I went. So I've been active, as you maybe have heard through my biography, I've been active since I was about 10 or 12 years old. And that has a lot to do with my mother, who moved to Canada at a young age and immigrated from Somalia and Ethiopia, and had to reestablish herself in Canada. So I went with her to a lot of community meetings. She volunteered a lot. She was a teacher at our local high school. So a lot of that volunteerism and that service that she was doing inspired me to wanting to do this, first locally in my city where I grew up in Ottawa, then nationally in Canada, serving on the Youth Council and working with the Prime Minister's office, and now at the international level, working internationally to work with young people and learn from young people, but also champion young people's issues around the world.
Thank you, Mr. Sharmaarke. So, ladies and gentlemen, hope that this answers your question. And then remember, we are the agent of change. We'll be right back. Mr. Sharmaarke, please stay on the stage. I'll pass to the Mr. Ceremony. Thank you.